In February of 2021, I took the night custodian job at the Franklin County Museum of Natural History. I told myself it was steady pay, quiet halls, and clean floors. After the last 2 years, I needed routine more than sleep. The building used to be a courthouse. Marble stairs, brass railings, and courtrooms turned into galleries with dioramas and taxidermy mounted like citizens on permanent jury duty. My first week, Manny, the day guy with 30 years under his belt, slid a fat binder across the break room table and told me to read it twice before my first solo overnight. Policies, checklists, chemical labels, map of the freight elevator, alarm codes in a sealed envelope, nothing I hadn't seen in hospitals and schools. What I hadn't seen was the sticky note Manny stuck to the first page. It said, in his block letters, "Midnight is when the extra page shows up." I laughed because older guys at every job have a ghost story they use to break in new hires. Manny didn't laugh back. He tapped the binder with a grease-dark fingernail and told me to keep it near the east stairwell after 11, because that was when the HVAC settled and the paper didn't curl. I did what he said because I grew up listening to men like Manny who knew buildings like other people know dogs. My first solo shift was a Friday. The museum closed at 5 and the last family out left a smear of fingerprints across the glass in front of the prairie wolf. Security had 2 men on, Clive and Ezra, and they were glad to see a night custodian who moved instead of napping in a chair. At 10, Ezra walked me through the alarm zones and pointed out the blind spot under the skeleton of the right whale. It hung 30 feet over the rotunda like a ribbed zeppelin. A maintenance harness crossed the sternum with a frayed strap someone kept promising to replace. I made notes because notes keep your hands busy when your brain wants to imagine footsteps. At 11:53, I took Manny's binder to the east stairwell landing like he'd said. The landing had a sole chair and a view across the administrative courtyard. At night, the windows made a cutout of my reflection against a square of darker dark. I flipped to the back of the manual, where it ended on page 47, janitorial chemicals. I waited because Manny's note said wait. At exactly midnight, a minute ticked off on my phone. The paper in the binder seemed to rise, like warm air lifting a curtain. A sheet I swear was not there before lay on top of 47. It was onion skin thin, typed, and smelled faintly like copier toner. The title line wasn't a title. It was a sentence. For night staff between 12 o'clock and 4 o'clock, follow these notes whether or not you believe them. I will write them exactly as they appeared that first night. If the phone on the basement wall rings after 12:03, do not answer. The number will look familiar. 2 at 12:12, do not stand directly under the whale. 3. If the portrait of the 3 sisters seems different, level the frame 3 turns and keep walking. 4. If the security guard makes a joke about the whale falling, do not follow him anywhere you cannot see the sky. I read them twice and felt ridiculous and then not ridiculous at all because the phone on the basement wall started ringing. It was the red emergency line the docents used on field trip days, and when I stepped close enough to see the tiny screen, the display read MOM. My mother has been dead since 2014. I did not answer. From the stairwell above me came the sound of a cart while tapping a tile seam. Steady, patient, like a metronome teaching me how to breathe wrong. I pressed my back to the wall and let it pass. When I leaned out, there was no cart, no scuffs. At 12:12, I was in the rotunda sweeping fingernail moons of glitter someone's kid had thrown. Clive walked in with his radio at his shoulder and tilted his head up at the whale. He said, "You know what I tell new guys?" I didn't answer because I was reading line 2 again inside my head. "The whale looks like it wants a hug," he said. Then he laughed and said, "Kidding, it always looks like it's about to fall." The manual's line 4 might as well have been stamped on my eyelids. I told him I had to check the boiler and walked away without explaining why a mop guy suddenly had business with steam. I took the service corridor by the conservation lab, where the lights were always 2 shades too dim. Behind the glass, a fox's pelt lay pinned to foam with insect pins like stars on a private map. The phone started ringing again, faint and more urgent, which is a trick of how brains hear the same sound twice. I didn't answer that one either. In portraits, the 3 sisters hung over a bench. Black dresses, lace collars, identical mouths. I'd walked by them in training, but that night the middle sister's locket hung outside her bodice instead of inside. I climbed the bench, reached up, and gave the tiny leveler mounted behind the frame 3 turns, like the page told me. The locket settled against painted skin, which is nonsense, but I saw it happen. On my way past the rotunda, Clive fell in beside me and said he was heading for a cigarette under the loading dock awning. Did I want air? It was sleeting outside. No sky to see except low clouds. I told him I had to wipe a spill in minerals and took the long way around, keeping plaster ceilings between us and the whale. Then I heard keys and a joke about the whale again. Keys jingled near the rotunda and the exact same joke about the whale came again, word for word, tone for tone. I stepped to the doorway and saw Clive's back moving toward the east stairs. Radio light winking blue. "Duck," he called without turning. The rule about not following anywhere without sky moved through me like a firm hand. I said I had to log pH tests in the lab. He lifted a thumbs up without looking and clattered down, gait stiff, heel first, like someone thinking about how to walk. I waited, then angled away toward the east landing. On the landing, Manny's binder lay where I'd left it. The extra page had new lines, ink wet as if written under glass. 5. If you smell penny metal at the Wolf, wipe the glass and don't check your reflection. 6. If anyone asks for boiler keys where you can't see sky, tell them Manny has them. 7. If you hear your name on a radio you aren't touching, don't answer. The basement emergency phone started ringing. The display read MOM. My mother has been gone since 2014. I counted to 5, didn't pick up, and felt both stupid and obedient. At 12:31, the Prairie Wolf's glass bloomed an oval of fog the size of a child's hand. The room smelled like warm pennies. I wiped slow circles without lifting my eyes. The fog cleared to clean glass and a wolf that stared past me into a painted distance. I kept my head down, counted strokes, and didn't check whether a second me stood in the reflection. At 12:44, a hair-thin sliver fell from the whale's harness and pinged on marble by my shoe. I stepped outside the compass rose in the floor and felt the minute hand crawl over me. I cleaned the north wing to keep momentum from turning into measuring. In courtroom B, the clock that hadn't moved in years read 1:03 and ticked once, like a bug shell. Back at the landing, a fresh line had appeared beneath the others. 8. The courtroom B clock only moves for you when it's not for you. Leave before 1:10. I left at 1:05 and let my mop bucket thrum on the tiles like a drum. My radio hissed. "You on the first floor?" Ezra asked. I keyed and said minerals, which was true on the map and untrue overhead. From conservation lab came a scraping, cardboard over wood. Through glass I saw the fox pelt arcing against its pins, as if it had stretched to test the board. I told myself heat did it and kept walking. The basement phone rang again, louder, and my mother's voice said my name the way she said it when dinner cooled. I didn't answer. Back at landing, another line typed itself into place. 9. If you think you're alone in the rotunda and hear keys, the man who joked will stand at the east stairs. Don't let him see your feet. I circled the second floor rail. Below, a man with Clive's outline stood at the stair mouth, head bowed as if listening for breath through stone. Keys chimed twice, then again like someone practicing the sound with their tongue. I took the balcony. At 2:20 I found Ezra at the monitors and asked where Clive was. He said he'd gotten a text that read, "Running late, back in 5, meet at Whittle Dock." Clive would never misspell that word. Ezra frowned and called him. Voicemail. He rewound camera 2. The rotunda feed juddered and smeared at the center like a thumbprint. By 2:43 the page had grown 3 short rules I wrote in my notebook and obeyed without asking why. Do not scrub the stain on the 3rd stair. Do not face the education room mirror if you are alone. And if you see water where water shouldn't be, walk around it as if it isn't there. At 3:07, 5 soft knocks came from inside the plumbing chase by the freight elevator, like a gloved hand. I stepped back into a pallet jack and bit my lip. Manny, I whispered, because Rule 6 had made his name a key. The knock stopped. The last hour stretched. Between 3:15 and 3:40, the building breathed like an animal dreaming. Every vent found a new whistle. Every case a new pop. I carried the open binder, palm warming the paper like a small stove. At 3:33, courtroom B's dead clock pointed both hands straight down at 6. then both straight up to midnight without passing anything between. The page offered nothing new. That was answer enough. I found Ezra at the front doors and stood under the black square of glass where Sky lived behind Sleet. We did not go to the loading dock tonight. At 3:59, the paper cooled. At 4 o'clock, the extra page was gone. Only page 47 remained, and a smear of toner at the edge like someone had erased a name quickly. At sunrise, Ezra walked the halls with me. The whale swayed when the air handlers kicked on, and the frayed strap had shed more hair. The fox's pins left new holes in the foam. The prairie wolf's glass was clean. Clive came whistling at 8, eyes tired, coffee in hand. He said he'd slept in his truck by the river. Anything weird? He asked. I said the wax behaved. I kept the job. Manny retired in July and left me his level and a flashlight. He wouldn't discuss the page in front of others. Alone, he said Gloria, the janitor before him, used to say the building prints its own instructions when it needs to. The rules change by person and by night, he said. The page isn't a threat. It's a promise someone else survived. I still put the binder on the east landing before midnight. Some nights nothing appears. Some nights the words arrive like rain. If you ever work here, turn to the back and wait.